They say a rejected bond feels like dying. They lied. Dying is peaceful. Dying is an ending, a final release from the burdens of a world that demands too much. A rejection is a tearing. It is the sound of your own soul being shredded into ribbons while your heart keeps beating just to prolong the agony. It is a scream trapped in a throat that has forgotten the mechanics of breathing. It is the universe looking at you and deciding you are no longer necessary. My knees collided with the unforgiving stone of the Iron Fang pack house floor. The cold seeped through the thin fabric of my ceremonial dress, biting into my skin, but it was nothing compared to the winter spreading through my veins. I gasped for air that felt like swallowed glass, each breath scraping against my throat. I clutched my chest, my fingers digging into my skin until I left crescent-shaped marks, trying to hold myself together physically because I knew, with terrifying certainty, that I was disintegrating spiritually. Above me, the man I had loved for 10 years, the man I was destined to serve, looked down. His eyes, usually warm with the camaraderie of pack life, were now void of anything human. There was no heat, no recognition, just the cold, clinical assessment of a butcher inspecting a cut of meat that didn't meet his standards. "Get her out of my sight!" Dragan sneered, turning his back on me as if I were something foul he had stepped in. "And open the gates. The buyer is here." The buyer. The word hung in the humid air of the hall. Not a pack member. Not a friend. A monster. The heavy oak doors groaned open, their iron hinges screaming in protest, revealing a silhouette framed by the raging storm outside. Lightning flashed, bleaching the world white for a split second, illuminating a face scarred by brutal wars and eyes that glowed with a terrifying molten gold. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like the apocalypse wrapped in a trench coat, and I was the sacrifice to appease his wrath. Chapter 1. The Rejection. Let us go back. Just 10 minutes. 10 minutes before my reality fractured into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The great hall of the Iron Fang pack was suffocating. It smelled of wet fur, unwashed bodies, and the sharp copper tang of anxiety. The pack had gathered for the Moon Festival, the sacred night where alliances were forged in blood and mates were claimed under the watchful eye of the goddess. Outside, the storm raged, hammering against the stained glass windows like a beast demanding entry. But inside, the silence was heavy, thick enough to choke on. I stood in the center of the circle, my head held high, though my hands trembled violently at my sides, betraying the terror fluttering in my ribcage. I was Lyra, an orphan of the pack, yes, but a loyal one. I was 20 years old. I was a healer, though my gift was small, enough to knit together a shallow cut, enough to draw the heat from a fever, but never enough to garner respect in a pack that valued violence and bloodshed above all else. But tonight, I wasn't just Lyra the orphan. I wasn't just the girl who cleaned the infirmary. I was the fated mate of the Alpha, Set. I had known it the moment Dragan turned 18. I had felt the pull, the magnetic snap of the universe aligning, the song in my blood that hummed his name. I had waited 2 long years for him to acknowledge it, to let me take my place by his side. Tonight was the night. The waiting was over. Dragan sat on the raised dais, lounging on his throne of carved bone and wood like a bored king. He twirled a glass of amber whiskey in his hand, the ice clinking, a sharp, rhythmic sound that echoed in the quiet room. He didn't look at me with longing. He didn't look at me with the possessive hunger of a wolf finding his other half. He looked at me with boredom. "Alpha," I said, my voice steady despite the racing of my heart, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. "The moon is high. I stand before you." The silence that followed stretched, agonizing and cruel. Dragan didn't smile. He didn't rush down the stairs to embrace me. He didn't let out the possessive growl that every female wolf dreamed of hearing. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate sip of his drink, his eyes scanning me with cold calculation, dissecting my flaws. "You stand before me," Dragan repeated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "And what do I see?" He stood up, the movement languid and predatory, descending the stairs one by one. The heavy thud of his boots echoed off the stone walls, sounding like the approach of an executioner. He circled me, sniffing the air, his lip curling in distaste. "I see a girl who faints at the sight of deep blood," he announced to the crowd, his voice carrying to the rafters. I see a wolf so small she could be mistaken for a fox. I see a liability. A murmur of agreement rippled through the pack. My cheeks burned with shame, heat flooding my face. I looked around searching for a friendly face, my neighbors, the people I had grown up with, the women I had helped birth pups, but they all looked away. They stared at the floor, at the walls, anywhere but at the girl their alpha was dismantling. This wasn't how it went in the stories. Dragan, I whispered, pleading, desperation clawing at my throat. I am your mate, the moon goddess chose. With a sudden violent motion, Dragan hurled his tumbler. The crystal struck the stone inches from my bare toes, exploding into a glittering shower of shards. Amber liquid splashed across my feet, staining my skin like old blood. I flinched, stepping back, shielding my face. The moon goddess does not pay for wars, Dragan roared, his composure cracking, the veins in his neck bulging. Look at the borders, Lyra. The northern packs are encroaching. We need steel. We need mercenaries. We need gold. We do not need fairy tales. He stepped closer, looming over me, his shadow swallowing me whole, suffocating me with his scent of whiskey and cruelty. I need a Luna who is a warrior, a killer, someone who can tear a throat out with her teeth. Or at the very least, I need an alliance with a rich pack. You offer me nothing. You are a burden I can no longer afford to carry. The realization struck me with the force of a collapsing wall. He didn't care about fate. He didn't care about the sacred bond that tied our souls together. He cared about power. He cared about winning a war he had started. I, Alpha Dragan of the Iron Fang, his voice boomed, utilizing the alpha command that forced every wolf to listen, freezing the marrow in our bones, reject you, Lyra, as my mate. The pain was instant. It wasn't just a feeling. It was a violation. It started in my chest, a hot, searing agony that spread through my veins like liquid fire, melting my insides. My wolf howled inside my head, a sound of pure, unadulterated despair that echoed in the hollows of my skull until I thought I would go deaf. I collapsed. I couldn't help it. My legs gave out as if the strings holding me upright had been severed. I gasped, clawing at the stone, trying to breathe, but the air felt too thin, as if he had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Dragan watched me writhe with indifference. He signaled to his beta, a man who had once shared his lunch with me. Pick her up. She's making a scene. Kill me? I choked out, looking up at him through tear-blurred eyes, my vision swimming. If you reject me, just exile me. Let me die in the woods. Let the cold take me. Dragan crouched down, gripping my chin in a bruising hold, forcing me to look at his sneering face. And waste such a pretty asset? No, Lyra. You are useless as a Luna, but you are valuable as a commodity. He stood up and checked his expensive watch, dismissing my agony. The Iron Fang is broke, but I found a buyer who has more money than sense. He's looking for a breeder, someone with ancient bloodlines. It seems your orphan heritage was good for something after all. Breeder. The word hung in the air, vile and terrifying, conjuring images of cages and darkness. Before I could scream, the beta stepped forward with silver cuffs. Silver. The metal that burned our kind. He snapped them onto my wrists. My skin sizzled, gray smoke rising from the contact point, the smell of burning flesh filling my nose. I cried out, but the searing pain of the silver was nothing compared to the pain of the betrayal. Open the doors, Dragan shouted over the thunder outside. Our salvation is here. Chapter 2. The Monster of Fierce Forest. The double doors of the great hall swung open, pushed by the wind. Rain lashed into the room, soaking the entrance rug, turning the dust to mud. But no one moved to close them, because standing in the threshold was a nightmare made flesh. He had to duck slightly to enter. His shoulders were broad enough to block out the storm. He wore a long black trench coat that dripped with water, pooling around his heavy combat boots. The scent hit me before he did. It wasn't the smell of a normal wolf. It smelled of the air before a lightning strike, of crushed pine needles, and something metallic, like blood on a sword that had never been wiped clean. The pack whimpered. I heard the distinct sound of a growl dying in a throat. Even the elders took a step back. This was Alpha Lucius, the monster of the fierce forest. Rumors said he tore the throats out of his enemies with his human teeth. Rumors said he had killed his last 3 mates because they weren't strong enough to survive his bedding. Rumors said he had no heart, only a jagged stone in his chest. He walked into the room. He didn't stride. He stalked. Every movement was fluid, lethal, and silent despite his size. He moved like a shadow detached from the wall. He stopped 10 feet from Dragan. He didn't bow. He didn't offer a hand. He just stared. His eyes were the color of molten gold, burning with an intensity that made me want to dig a hole in the floor and hide until the end of time. "Is this her?" His voice was deep, a baritone rumble that vibrated in my chest, rattling my ribs. It sounded like rocks grinding together deep underground, shifting the tectonic plates of the room. Dragan puffed out his chest, trying to look dominant, but I could smell the sour stench of fear radiating off him. It smelled like vinegar. "This is her," Dragan confirmed, forcing a grin that looked more like a rictus of terror. "Lyra, pure bloodline, healthy, young. She will bear you strong pups, Lucius." Lucius turned his head slowly. His gaze landed on me. I stopped breathing. The world narrowed down to those golden eyes. He looked at the silver cuffs burning my wrists. He looked at the tears tracking through the dirt on my face. He looked at Dragan's bruising handprint on my chin. His eyes narrowed. A low growl started in his throat, a sound so primal, so filled with ancient violence, that the hair on my arm stood up. "You chained her with silver." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. It was a verdict. "She was resistant," Dragan stammered, taking a half step back. "It was necessary for the transfer. Take them off." Once the payment is confirmed, Lucius moved so fast I didn't see it. 1 second he was standing 10 feet away. The next, he was in Dragan's face, a blur of darkness. His hand wrapped around Dragan's throat, lifting him off the ground. Dragan choked, his feet dangling, kicking uselessly at the air. The Iron Fang guards raised their weapons, but Lucius didn't even look at them. His aura flared, a wave of dominance so crushing that half the guards dropped to their knees, wheezing. The money is already in your account, you greedy cur," Lucius snarled, his voice a low hiss. "Now take the chains. Off." He dropped Dragan like a sack of potatoes. Dragan hit the floor hard, gasping, clutching his throat, his face turning purple. He waved frantically at the beta. "Do it! Unlock her!" The beta fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so hard he dropped them twice. The metallic clatter echoed in the silent hall. Finally, the cuffs clicked open. I cradled my burned wrists against my chest, shivering violently, the raw skin throbbing in time with my heart. "Say..." Lucius turned his back on Dragan, a massive insult in wolf culture, and walked toward me. He towered over me, blotting out the light. Then, he knelt. The monster of the north knelt in front of me. Up close, he was even more terrifying. A jagged white scar ran through his left eyebrow down to his cheek. His jaw was covered in dark stubble. He looked wild, untamed, dangerous. He reached out a gloved hand. I flinched, squeezing my eyes shut, bracing for pain, waiting for him to drag me by the hair to his car. Instead, I felt warmth. He had taken off his glove. His large, rough hand cupped my cheek. His skin was callous, but his touch was feather-light. His thumb brushed away a tear. I opened my eyes. The golden fire in his gaze had dimmed. He was looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't hate. It looked almost like relief. "Can you walk, little wolf?" he asked softly. I don't think so," I stammered, my voice cracking, destroyed by screaming. Without a word, he slid his arms under me. One under my knees, one around my back. He lifted me effortlessly, pulling me against his massive chest. His body heat was incredible, like standing next to a furnace. It seeped into my frozen bones, thawing the ice in my veins. He turned and walked toward the door. "Oh, pleasure doing business with you, Lucius," Dragan called out behind us, his voice rasping, trying to regain his dignity in front of his pack. "No returns?" Lucius paused in the doorway. He didn't turn around. The muscles in his back tightened against my side. "Pray that our paths never cross again, Dragan," Lucius said, his voice carrying over the storm. clear and cold as death. Because next time, I won't be bringing a checkbook. I'll be bringing an army. He carried me out into the rain. He didn't rush. He shielded my body with his own, taking the brunt of the icy downpour on his broad back. He opened the passenger door of a massive black SUV and set me down gently on the leather seat. He leaned in to buckle my seatbelt, his face inches from mine. I trembled, the scent of pine and rain overwhelming me, making my head spin. "Did he hurt you?" he whispered. I blinked, confused. "What?" "Besides the chains," he clarified, his voice dropping to a dangerous octave, vibrating against my skin. "Did he touch you before I arrived?" "No," I whispered. "Just the rejection, just the breaking of my heart." Lucius nodded once, his jaw tight. "Good. Then he gets to live another day." He shut the door, sealing me in the warm, dry dark. As we drove away, leaving my home, my past, and my traitorous mate behind, I realized I was trapped in a car with a monster, but for some reason, the monster felt safer than the home I had left. Chapter 3. The Golden Cage. The drive took 3 hours. We climbed higher and higher into the mountains, the roads becoming treacherous ribbons of ice. We left the territory of the Iron Fang far behind. I sat in silence, staring out the window at the passing blur of trees, clutching my burned wrists. Lucius didn't speak. He drove with one hand on the wheel, his focus absolute. I must have dozed off, exhausted by the trauma, my body shutting down to preserve itself. I woke up as the car stopped. I looked out the window and gasped. The fierce forest pack house wasn't a house. It was a fortress carved into the living rock of the mountain. It was modern, made of steel, glass, and dark stone, jutting out over a cliff face like the prow of a ship. It looked impenetrable, a prison designed for giants. "We are here," Lucius said. He opened my door. The air here was thin and freezing, biting at my nose. Snow covered the ground in a pristine white blanket. I stepped out, my legs wobbly, the snow crunching under my boots. Lucius walked toward the massive front door. He didn't grab me. He didn't chain me. He seemed to assume I would just follow. Like a pet. Like a broken thing that had nowhere else to go. Panic flared in my chest, hot and sudden. I wasn't a pet. I wasn't a breeder. I looked at the dense forest surrounding the driveway. The trees were thick, ancient pines that looked like they held secrets. If I could get into the tree line, maybe I could lose him. Maybe I could run south, find a neutral territory where no one knew my name. Lucius was typing a code into the door panel. His back was turned. Now, I bolted. I didn't shift. My wolf was too weak from the rejection, curled into a ball of misery in my mind. But I ran with human legs, pumping my arms, my boots slipping on the icy gravel. The cold air burned my lungs. I made it 10 yards. 20. The tree line was so close I could smell the sap. Then a blur of motion cut off the wind. I didn't hear him move. 1 second, the path was clear. The next, a wall of black wool and muscle blocked my way. Lucius stood in front of me, his hands in his pockets, looking bored. I gasped, skidding to a halt, turning to the left. He stepped left. Mirroring me? I turned right. He stepped right. He was toying with me. He was a cat, and I was a mouse with a broken leg. "Let me go!" I screamed, the hysteria finally bubbling over. "I won't be your slave. I won't bear your children for war." I threw a punch. It was sloppy, desperate, aimed at his chest. Lucius caught my fist in his large hand. He didn't squeeze. He just stopped it, absorbing the impact as if I were a child. He pulled me forward, off balance, until my chest collided with his. He spun me around, pressing my back against the rough bark of a pine tree. He leaned in, his forearms bracketing my head, trapping me. He wasn't touching me, but he was everywhere. His heat, his scent, his shadow. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low and dangerous, rumbling through the small space between us. "And listen well. I do not want a slave, and I do not want a breeder." "Then why did you buy me?" I sobbed, the fight draining out of me, leaving me hollow. "Why pay 10 million for a rejected wolf? Why waste a fortune on trash?" "Because," he murmured, leaning down so his lips brushed the shell of my ear, sending a shiver down my spine, "Dragan was going to break you. And I do not like seeing beautiful things broken. I froze. Beautiful? Me? The rejected girl? He pulled back slightly, his golden eyes searching mine, peeling back the layers of my defense. You are free to walk this house, Lyra. You are free to walk these grounds. But do not try to leave the territory. Or what? You'll hunt me down? Yes, he said simply, stating a fact as immutable as gravity. Run from Dragan. Run from the world. But never run from me. Because I will always catch you. He stepped back, offering me his hand. It was a gentleman's gesture, at odds with the threat he had just issued. Now, come inside, you're shivering. Chapter 4. The Scent of Rain and Pine. The room he gave me was beautiful. A golden cage indeed, but a comfortable one. It had a fireplace that roared with warmth, a massive bed piled high with furs, and a balcony overlooking the snowy valley. I found clothes in the closet, my size, high-quality wool, silk, soft cotton, no chains, no rags, no collars. I washed the scent of the Iron Fang off me, scrubbing until my skin was raw. Trying to erase the memory of Dragan's touch, I dressed in a soft sweater and leggings. My stomach rumbled, betraying me. I hadn't eaten since yesterday. I went downstairs, following the savory smell of roasted meat. In the kitchen, I met a man with kind eyes and sandy hair. He was chopping vegetables with a rhythm that suggested he did this often. Beta Soren, he introduced himself with a bow, wiping his hands on a towel. Welcome to Fierce Forest, Lyra. I hope the Alpha hasn't scared you too much. He's intense, I managed, leaning against the counter for support. He has the weight of the North on his shoulders, Soren said, a shadow crossing his face. But he is not cruel. He forgets how to be human sometimes. But he is not cruel. Come, dinner is served. The dining room was a long, cavernous hall with a ceiling that vanished into darkness. Lucius sat at the head of the table. He had changed into a dark sweater, looking more human, less like a warlord, though the power still rolled off him in waves. I sat at the other end, miles of mahogany between us. We ate in silence. The only sound was the fire crackling in the hearth and the clicking of silverware on china. I watched him. He ate with precision. He didn't look at me, but I felt his awareness. It was like sitting in a room with a sleeping tiger. You knew that at any moment the eyes could open, and the violence could begin. You said you didn't want a breeder, I spoke up, my voice echoing in the large room, startling myself. Lucius paused, a glass of red wine halfway to his lips. So, what am I doing here, Lucius? If I'm not a prisoner and I'm not a guest, what am I? Lucius set the glass down slowly. He looked at me, his eyes dark, unreadable. You are safe. Is that not enough? No, I said, emboldened by the wine I had drunk on an empty stomach. I need to know, why me? There were other wolves, stronger wolves. Lucius stood up abruptly. The chair scraped loud and harsh against the floor, a sound like a gunshot. He walked toward me. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had I pushed too far? Was the monster about to reveal himself? He stopped right behind my chair. He leaned down, his hands gripping the back of the wood. I could feel his breath on my neck, hot and steady. And then it hit me. In the car, I had been too terrified. In the woods, I had been too cold. But here, in the warmth, with him standing so close, the scent was undeniable. Pine, rain, and something sweet, like honey and amber, like a warm hearth in the middle of a blizzard. It was the most intoxicating smell I had ever encountered. It flooded my senses, drowning out fear, drowning out logic. It made my mouth water. It made my wolf, who had been curled up and dying, lift her head and whine. Hey, mate, the word whispered through my mind, a seductive promise. No, it was impossible. I was rejected. My bond was broken. You only get one mate. That was the law of nature, but the pull was there, gravity shifting, the axis of my world tilting toward him. I wanted to lean back against him. I wanted him to bite me. I wanted to bury my face in his neck and breathe him in. Lucius froze. He inhaled sharply, a ragged, desperate sound, as if he were drowning and I was air. He smelled it too. Damn it, he hissed under his breath. His grip on the chair tightened until the wood creaked, threatening to splinter under his strength. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with static electricity. He wanted to touch me. I could feel the battle raging inside him. The beast against the man. The instinct to claim against the restraint of will. Get out, he growled, his voice rough. Lucius? Leave the room, Lyra, he roared, his voice shaking with restrained fury. Go to your room and lock the door. Now, before I lose control. Terrified by the sudden aggression, I scrambled out of the chair and ran. As I fled up the stairs, my heart pounding in my ears, I heard the crash of the dining table being overturned. Chapter 5. The Denial. I locked my door. I pushed a heavy oak dresser in front of it. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the snow fall in heavy, silent flakes. Mate? Could it be? Was the moon goddess cruel enough to give me a second mate, only to place him in the body of a man terrifying enough to destroy me? Or was she kind enough to give me a protector? Or was I going mad? Maybe the rejection had broken my mind. For 3 days, Lucius vanished. The house was a tomb. Soren brought me food, leaving trays outside my door. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes. He's on patrol, Soren said evasively when I caught him in the hall. The boarders are restless. I was alone in the massive house. Well, almost alone. I ventured to the training gym on the 4th day, needing to move my body, needing to burn off the restless energy consuming me. A woman was there, tall, striking, with hair like an oil slick and lips painted blood red. She was hitting a heavy bag with lethal precision, her kicks shaking the frame. She stopped when she saw me. So, she said, her voice dripping with disdain, the stray cat comes out to play. I'm Lyra. I know who you are. I'm Belladonna, head warrior, and the woman who should be sitting at Lucius's right hand. She walked over, towering over me. She smelled of jealousy and bitter perfume. Do you know why he avoids you? She sneered, invading my personal space. It's not because he's overwhelmed by your beauty. It's because you smell like him. Like Dragan. Like the enemy. You are a walking reminder of the pack that wants to kill us. He looks at you and sees a mistake. A charity case he regrets buying. Her words cut deeper than any knife. Pity, of course. That's why he roared at me. He wasn't fighting the mate bond. He was fighting disgust. He looked at me and smelled the man who had thrown me away. I turned and ran back to the main house, blind with tears. I didn't watch where I was going. I wandered aimlessly through the corridors, eventually finding myself in the West Wing, the forbidden wing. I smelled blood. Fresh, hot blood. The metallic scent was unmistakable. I followed the scent to a heavy oak door. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. It was a study, lined with books from floor to ceiling. And there, sitting in a leather armchair by the dying fire, was Lucius. He was shirtless, and he was bleeding. A massive gash ran down his side, angry and black. The edges of the wound were bubbling, silver poisoning. He was trying to stitch it himself, his hands shaking, sweat pouring down his pale face. I told you, no one enters, he gritted out, not looking up, his voice weak. You're dying, I whispered, stepping into the room. I'm fine. Get out. The fear vanished. The healer took over. I rushed forward, knocking the needle from his hand. Stop it. You're making it worse. Lyra, don't, he groaned, trying to push me away. The blood, it's toxic. It will burn you. Shut up, Alpha, I commanded, surprised by my own authority. I knelt between his legs. I placed my hands on the wound. Usually my magic was a trickle, a small stream of warmth. But the moment my skin touched his, it was like a dam broke. A roar of power surged through me, ancient and wild. Golden light exploded from my palms, blindingly bright, illuminating the dark corners of the room. It didn't drain me. It fed me. Lucius gasped, his back arching off the chair. We both watched in awe as the black veins receded. The flesh knit together, cell calling to cell. The skin smoothed over. In seconds, the wound was gone. Not even a scar remained. I pulled my hands back, staring at them. They were glowing faintly. I looked up. Lucius was staring at me. His eyes were wide, the gold swirling with an emotion that looked a lot like worship. That, he breathed, that is not possible. Not unless. Chapter 6. Fated Mates. The silence in the room was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive anymore. It was intimate. The air shimmered between us, thick with unsaid words. Unless what? I whispered. Unless our souls are one. He reached out, his hand trembling, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was electric, sending sparks dancing across my skin. Why do you think I paid $10 million, Lyra? Why do you think I crossed enemy lines alone, unarmed? To save me? No, to find you. He grabbed my hand and pressed it flat against his chest, directly over his heart. It was beating so fast it felt like a hummingbird's wings. Desperate and wild. 3 days before the auction, I woke up in pain, a pulling in my chest. An ache that nothing could soothe. I knew my mate was in danger. I didn't know your name. I didn't know your face. But when I walked into that hall, when I saw you in chains, I wanted to burn the world to ash for daring to touch what is mine. But Dragan rejected me. The bond broke. I felt it break. A false bond, Lucius said fiercely. A pack bond. Compatible perhaps, but not fated. The moon goddess cleared the way. She broke the wrong chain so I could forge the right one. My breath hitched. Fated mates. The legends said they were rare, powerful, that they made an alpha invincible, that they made a pack unbreakable. You knew at dinner, I realized. That's why you sent me away. I sent you away because I wanted to claim you on that table, he growled, his eyes flashing with a predatory heat, and I knew you were terrified of me. I didn't want to be another alpha forcing his will on you. I didn't want you to fear me. Slowly, deliberately, the monster of the north slid off his chair. He lowered himself to the rug. He went down on one knee, then the other. He knelt before me. My hands flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. Alphas never knelt, especially not to rejected wolves. He took my hands and pressed his forehead against them in a gesture of absolute submission. I am a killer, Lyra. I have blood on my hands that will never wash off. I am not a good man. I am a weapon forged in war. But I am your man. He looked up, his gaze searing into my soul. I will wait, a day, a year, a lifetime. I will wait until you are ready to accept me. But know this, you are the Luna of this pack. You are the queen of this forest. And I am just your sword. Tears spilled down my cheeks. Not tears of pain, tears of healing, tears of relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being sold. I wasn't being used. I was being chosen. I reached out, my fingers brushing the stubble on his jaw. Lucius! The moment shattered. The door burst open. Soren stumbled in, his face gray with ash, his clothes smelling of smoke. Alpha. Apologies, but Lucius was on his feet in a microsecond, shielding me with his body, a low growl rumbling in his chest. This better be the apocalypse, Soren. Close to it, Soren gasped, leaning against the doorframe. The southern watchtower is burning, and we found a body on the perimeter. Whose body? One of ours. With the message carved into his chest. Lucius went still, deadly still. The tenderness was gone, replaced by the mask of the warlord. Read it. It says, "The sale is cancelled. Give her back, or the forest burns." Lucius turned to me. His hand found mine, gripping it tight, anchoring me to him. "Let them come," he whispered, his eyes promising death. "Let them burn. They will never touch you again." Chapter 7. Domestic Bliss and Shadows. Time in the fierce forest did not move like time in the Iron Fang. There, days were measured in bruises and insults. Here, days were measured in heartbeats and cups of tea left on my bedside table. 3 weeks had dissolved since the threat arrived, but the attack had not yet come. We lived in the eye of the hurricane, a suspended reality where I allowed myself to pretend that war was just a rumor. Lucius kept his promise. He did not force the bond. Instead, he courted me, not with flowers or poetry, but with steel. Every morning before the sun crested the peaks, we met in the training dojo. The mat smelled of sweat and discipline. Lucius didn't treat me like porcelain. He threw me, he pinned me. He taught me how to use my small size as a fulcrum to topple giants. Again he commanded, his voice rough with sleep, standing over me as I gasped for air on the mat. I lunged, He sidestepped, but this time, I anticipated it. I swept my leg, hooking his ankle. For a split second, the great alpha wobbled. It was a victory microscopic in scale, but titanic in significance. He caught his balance, of course, but a grin split his face, a rare, jagged expression that made my insides tumble. Good, he rumbled, offering a hand to pull me up. You're learning to think like a predator, Lyra, not prey. I took his hand. His skin was rough, a map of callus and scar tissue, but his grip was an anchor. When he pulled me up, he didn't let go immediately. We stood chest to chest, the air between us thick with the unsaid. The bond hummed in my blood, a low-frequency vibration that demanded I close the distance. I am safe here, I whispered, realizing it was true for the first time. You are, he vowed, his thumb tracing the pulse point of my wrist. But safety is a fragile illusion. That evening, the illusion shattered. We were in the library, Lucius reading reports while I organized the pack's medical inventory. The door burst open. It wasn't Soren this time. It was a perimeter guard, his face the color of old ash. Alpha, you need to come. The north gate. We drove in silence. The scent of pine was soured by the copper tang of death long before we saw it. At the border of the territory, where the trees gave way to the rocky expanse of no man's land, a stake had been driven into the frozen earth. I gagged, burying my face in Lucius's coat. It was a wolf, a young sentry I had smiled at only yesterday. His chest had been carved open, ribs cracked apart like a grotesque cage, and burned into the flesh of his torso was a symbol I knew better than my own name. Shandai. The Iron Fang. Pinned to the body with a hunting knife was a note. Lucius stepped forward, his body radiating a heat so intense it began to melt the snow around his boots. He ripped the note free. Read it, I choked out, needing to know the depth of Dragan's madness. Lucius's voice was a graveyard growl. He says, "You have something that belongs to me. She is a healer. Return the battery, or I will dismantle the machine." Dragan knew. He didn't just want a mate back to save face. He knew I was a healer. He wanted his battery. He wanted to drain me dry to fuel his army. Lucius crushed the note in his fist, the paper turning to ash instantly under his touch. "He thinks he can terrorize us," Lucius said, turning to the gathering pack members. "He thinks fear will make us open the gates." He looked at me, his golden eyes blazing with a terrifying promise. "Burn the body with honor," he commanded the guards, "and double the patrols. If a leaf falls in this forest, I want to know about it." Chapter 8. The Ultimatum. The council room was a chamber of shadows and ancient wood, smelling of dust and rigid tradition. 12 elders sat around the circular table. I stood by Lucius's side, feeling like an intruder in a tomb. The mood was mutinous. "She is one female," Elder Marcus argued, slamming his fist on the table. "Just one. Dragan has 3 packs allied with him now. He outnumbers us 5-1. He doesn't want land, Lucius. He wants her. Give him the girl, and the war ends before it begins." My heart shriveled. It was a logical argument. A cruel, mathematical logic. One life for hundreds. I stepped forward, my voice trembling. "He is right," I said. The room went silent. I looked at Lucius. "I can't let your people die for me. I'm not worth a kingdom, Lucius." Lucius turned to me slowly. He didn't look angry. He looked devastated that I would even think such a thing. "You are not worth a kingdom," he agreed softly. A collective sigh of relief went through the elders. Marcus smirked. "Smart lad. Hand her over." Lucius turned back to the table. His movement was slow, deliberate, like a glacier shifting. "She is not worth a kingdom," Lucius repeated, his voice rising, vibrating the stained glass windows. "She is worth the universe. She is my mate. She is your Luna, and she is the only reason I haven't torn this room apart for your insolence." But Alpha Marcus started. Lucius moved. It wasn't the blur of speed he usually used. It was simply unstoppable force. He grabbed Marcus by the throat and lifted him one-handed. "I brought her here to save her!" Lucius roared, the beast surfacing in his eyes. "Do you think I will hand her back to a butcher so you can sleep soundly? Dragan wants her because she is a healer. He will chain her to a bed and drain her magic until she is a husk. Is that the honor of the fierce forest? To trade a woman's soul for peace? He threw Marcus back into his chair with enough force to crack the wood. Hear me now. Lucius addressed the room, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Lyra is Luna. Anyone who suggests trading her again commits treason. And the penalty for treason is death. Are we clear? The silence was absolute. 12 heads bowed in fear. Crystal clear, Alpha, Marcus wheezed. Lucius took my hand and led me out. In the hallway, his composure cracked. He leaned against the wall, his hands shaking. They want me to be a monster, he whispered, closing his eyes. So I will be the monster. I will be the nightmare Dragan fears. But I cannot lose you, Lyra. I cannot. Chapter 9. The Forbidden Night. That night, the air in the pack house was heavy, suffocating under the weight of the looming siege. I couldn't breathe in my room. The walls felt like they were closing in. I needed an anchor. I walked down the dark hallway, my bare feet silent on the floorboards. I didn't knock on his door. I pushed it open. Lucius was standing by the balcony doors, staring out at the dark tree line. He was shirtless, the moonlight tracing the ridges of muscle on his back, highlighting the scars of 100 battles. He turned as I entered. Lyra, is something wrong? Everything is wrong, I whispered, closing the door and locking it. They are coming, Lucius. Tomorrow, or the day after. Death is marching toward us. I crossed the room. He stood frozen, watching me. I don't want to die as Lyra the orphan, I said, stopping inches from him. I don't want to die as a guest in your house. What do you want? His voice was a ruined rasp. I reached out, placing my hand over his heart. It hammered against my palm, a frantic rhythm. I want to be yours. Completely. If we end tomorrow, I want to know what it feels like to be whole tonight. Lucius groaned, a sound torn from his depths. He grabbed my waist, pulling me flush against him. The heat of him seared through my thin nightgown. There is no going back, Lyra, he warned, his golden eyes searching mine. Once I mark you, our souls are tied. If I die, you will feel it. It will break you. Then break me, I challenged, because living without you isn't living anyway. He didn't speak again. He kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision, a desperate, starving thing. He lifted me, wrapping my legs around his waist, carrying me to the bed as if I weighed nothing. The night became a blur of sensation, skin against skin, the scent of pine and rain drowning out the smell of fear. We moved together with a frantic urgency, trying to memorize the map of each other's bodies before the war could erase us. When the moment came, when the pleasure crested into something spiritual, he buried his face in the crook of my neck. Mine, he growled against my skin. Yours, I sobbed. His teeth grazed the sensitive skin where my neck met my shoulder. The marking spot. I didn't flinch. I arched into it. He bit down. Pain and ecstasy exploded in equal measure. It felt like lightning striking my blood. I gasped, my back arching, as a golden thread snapped into place between our minds. I could feel him. Not just his body, but his fear, his love, his fierce, protective rage. I was no longer alone in my own head. We collapsed together, panting, limbs tangled. I traced the fresh mark on his shoulder. I had bitten him back, claiming him just as fiercely. I love you, I whispered into the dark. A deafening mechanical siren wailing throughout the house. The sound severed the moment like a guillotine. Lucius was out of bed in a second, shifting from lover to warlord before my eyes. He pulled on his tactical pants, his face hardening into stone. The perimeter is breached, he said, his voice void of the warmth from moments ago. It has begun. Chapter 10. The Siege. The world turned into noise. The peaceful silence of the forest was replaced by the roar of fire and the clash of steel. From the window, I saw the tree line glowing orange. Dragan hadn't just brought wolves. He had brought incendiary grenades. He was burning us out. Stay here, Lucius commanded, strapping a blade to his thigh. Belladonna is guarding the door. Do not leave this room. He kissed me hard, a taste of goodbye. And then he was gone, plunging into the chaos. I stood there for a moment, trembling. Then, the healer in me woke up. No. I grabbed my medical kit. I wasn't a damsel to be locked in a tower. I was the Luna. I ran into the hallway. The house was vibrating with the sounds of battle downstairs. I found Belladonna standing by the stairs, sharpening a knife. She looked at me, her eyes cold and reptilian. "He told you to stay put, Stray," she said. "My people are dying," I snapped. "I'm going to the infirmary. Get out of my way." I pushed past her. To my surprise, she let me go. She watched me run down the stairs with a smile that chilled my blood colder than the winter air. The infirmary was a slaughterhouse. Wolves were dragging themselves in, bleeding from silver wounds. Soren was there, holding a compress to a young girl's neck. His face was pale. "Lyra!" Soren shouted over the screams. "We need help!" I dove in. I didn't think. I just worked. My hands glowed with golden light, stitching flesh, drawing out poison. I moved from patient to patient, draining my energy until I felt faint, but I couldn't stop. Then, the back wall exploded. Debris rained down. Through the smoke, 3 wolves wearing the Iron Fang insignia leaped in. "Defend the Luna!" Soren screamed, throwing himself in front of me. He took a blade to the gut meant for me. He went down gasping. "No," I screamed. I dropped to my knees beside him, my hands pressing into the wound. The Iron Fang wolves circled us, grinning. "Where are the guards?" I yelled, looking for Belladonna. She was the head warrior. This was her post. I looked up toward the doorway. Belladonna stood there, leaning against the frame, watching the enemy wolves circle me. She locked eyes with me. Oops," she mouthed, her smirk cruel and satisfied. She turned and walked away, leaving the infirmary defenseless. She had lowered the shields. She had let them in. Chapter 11. Taken. The betrayal stung, but survival screamed louder. One of the Iron Fang wolves lunged. I didn't freeze. I remembered the mats. I remembered Lucius's voice. "Think like a predator?" I dropped flat. The wolf sailed over me. As he landed, I drove a scalpel from my medical kit into his hind leg. He howled. I scrambled up, grabbing a heavy oxygen tank and swinging it with all my might. It connected with the second wolf's skull with a sickening crack. 2 down. But I wasn't a warrior. I was a healer fighting killers. The third wolf shifted into his human form. It was Dragan's beta. He didn't attack. He pulled a tranquilizer gun. "Good night, Luna," he sneered. I tried to dodge, but the dart hit me in the shoulder. Fire spread through my arm. My vision blurred instantly. My knees turned to water. I fell. Through the haze, I saw boots. Heavy, muddy combat boots, walking toward me. Not Lucius's boots. Dragan stepped into my fading vision. He looked down at me, shaking his head. "So much trouble for such a little thing," he tisked. He bent down and scooped me up. "Lucius?" I screamed, but my mouth wouldn't move. The drug had paralyzed my tongue. I did the only thing I could. I screamed through the bond. I gathered every ounce of terror, every drop of love, and I hurled it down the golden thread connecting me to Lucius. "Lucius!" The reaction was instantaneous. Outside, on the battlefield, the earth shook. A roar tore through the night, a sound so full of agony and rage that it shattered the windows of the infirmary. It was the sound of a mate feeling his other half being stolen. Dragan flinched, looking toward the door with genuine fear. "Shh, time to go," he muttered. He carried me out the back breach, into the darkness, just as a massive black wolf burst into the room, tearing the door off its hinges. I saw Lucius for 1 second. He was covered in blood, his eyes wild, scanning the room. He saw Soren bleeding out. He saw the empty space where I had been. Shut. His howl of loss followed us into the night, haunting me as the darkness finally dragged me under. Chapter 12. The Dungeon of Iron Fang. Waking up was a slow, nauseating process. The smell hit me first. Mold, rust, despair. I opened my eyes. I knew this ceiling. I knew these dripping stone walls. I was back in the dungeons of the Iron Fang. The circle was complete. I tried to sit up, but my hands were shackled above my head. Not silver this time. Iron. Dragan needed me alive and magical. The heavy door creaked open. Dragan walked in, looking smug. He pulled up a chair and sat backward on it, watching me. "Comfortable?" he asked. "Where is he?" I rasped, my throat dry as sandpaper. "Who? The monster?" Dragan shrugged. "Dead, I assume. We burned the house down with him inside. Liar, I spat. I would feel it. Would you? Dragan leaned forward. Or is that just wishful thinking? The bond fades when the mate dies, Lyra. It doesn't snap. It just dissolves. Do you feel him? I closed my eyes and reached for the thread. It was silent. Usually the bond hummed with his presence. Now, there was only static, a cold, empty void. No, he was blocking me. He had to be blocking me to protect the pack's location. He couldn't be dead. He's coming for me, I whispered, clinging to faith like a lifeline. No one is coming, Dragan sighed, but I do have a surprise for you. A roommate. He stood up and kicked the door open wider. 2 guards dragged a woman in and threw her onto the damp straw. She was beaten, bloody, her oil-slick hair matted with gore. Belladonna. You might want to thank her, Dragan laughed. She opened the back gates for us. Thought I'd make her my Luna as a reward. Belladonna groaned, spitting out a tooth. But, Dragan continued, his voice turning cold, I don't like traitors. If she betrayed Lucius, she'll betray me. He turned to leave. Enjoy your reunion, ladies. Tomorrow, Lyra, we start the extraction. I hear draining a healer hurts. A lot. He slammed the door, plunging us into semi-darkness. I looked at Belladonna. I should have hated her. She was the reason I was here. She was the reason Soren was dying. Why? I asked into the gloom. She rolled onto her back, wheezing. I wanted to be queen, she coughed. I thought, if you were gone, he would see me. He saw you, I said quietly. He saw a traitor. She laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. He's not dead, she whispered. My head snapped up. What? Dragan? Lied. Lucius is alive. I saw him, tearing through the battalion like a demon. Just before they dragged me away, relief crashed into me so hard I almost wept. He was alive. He was blocking the bond, so Dragan couldn't trace him through me. Belladonna reached into her boot. Her hand was shaking. She pulled out a small, twisted piece of metal, a lockpick. I'm dying, she said, clutching her side. Gut wound, silver blade. Won't last the hour. She slid the pick across the stone floor toward me. Take it. Why? I asked, staring at the metal. Because, she gasped, her eyes glazing over. Dragan promised me a throne. But Lucius promised me a family. And I burned it down. She coughed once, a violent spasm, and then went still. Her chest stopped rising. I stared at the dead woman who had betrayed me, and then at the small piece of metal gleaming in the dim light. It was a sliver of hope. I stretched my leg out, straining against the shackles until the metal bit into my skin. My toe brushed the cold steel of the lockpick. I dragged it closer inch by agonizing inch, fighting the cramp seizing my thigh until I could grip it between my feet. I lifted my legs, my abs screaming in protest, and dropped the lockpick into my lap. I stared at the small, twisted piece of metal. It was a sliver of hope in a mountain of darkness. I am coming, Lucius, I whispered to the silent bond, though I didn't know if he could hear me. Just hold on. I gripped the lockpick. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Chapter 13. The Escape. The lockpick was cold against my skin, a jagged little promise of freedom. My shoulders screamed in protest as I manipulated the metal with my toes, bringing it up to my bound hands. It took an eternity of fumbling, of metal scratching against metal until click! The mechanism yielded. The iron cuff snapped open. I didn't waste a breath on relief. Relief was a luxury for the living, and I wasn't sure I was among them yet. I freed my other hand and scrambled toward the back wall. I found the loose stone Belladonna had whispered about with her dying breath. Behind it lay a tunnel, smelling of wet earth and ancient decay. I squeezed into the dark. The tunnel was a throat of stone, tight and suffocating. It scraped the skin from my knees and elbows, but I crawled. I crawled until the air turned from the stagnant scent of the dungeon to the biting sharpness of winter. I emerged into a twilight world. No man's land. The frozen strip of territory that separated the Iron Fang from the rest of the world. The wind here didn't just blow, it hunted. It sliced through my thin prison tunics, searching for the heat of my blood. I stood up, swaying on legs that felt like hollow reeds. I looked north. Miles of snow and ice stood between me and safety. I began to run. It wasn't a sprint. It was a stumble forward, a refusal to fall. The snow was thigh-deep, a white quicksand that tried to drag me down with every step. My lungs burned as if I were inhaling shattered glass. Lucius. I used his name as a mantra. I wrapped it around my freezing heart to keep it beating. I ran until the sun began to bleed over the horizon, staining the snow in shades of violet and bruised crimson. But my body had limits. The drug Dragan had injected me with was still a phantom in my blood, tilting the world on its axis. My foot caught on a hidden root. I went down hard. The impact jarred my teeth, and the snow packed into my mouth, tasting of iron and ice. I tried to push myself up, but my arms trembled and collapsed. The cold began to seep into my marrow, whispering that it would be easier to just close my eyes. Then the earth shuddered. It wasn't the wind. It was a rhythmic, heavy thudding. The sound of a predator. I lifted my head. Through the mist, a shadow materialized. It was massive, a creature woven from the night itself. A wolf, black as the void between stars, standing nearly as tall as a horse at the shoulder. Lucius, he had found me. Lucius, I croaked, the sound tearing at my raw throat. I tried to stand, to run to him. But he didn't run to me. He slowed, his movements stiff and jerky. His hackles were raised, a ridge of jagged fur along his spine. His lips peeled back to reveal teeth the size of daggers, dripping with saliva. He didn't look at me with recognition. He looked at me with the hollow, starving eyes of a beast who had forgotten its name. Chapter 14. The Feral Alpha. I froze, the blood turning to slush in my veins. The feral state. I had heard the legends. When an alpha believes his fated mate is dead, the grief is a psychic guillotine. It severs the human mind, leaving only the wolf, a creature of pure, unbridled rage and instinct. To him, I wasn't Lyra. I wasn't his love. I was an intruder standing in his path. He stalked toward me, a low growl vibrating in his chest, a sound like tectonic plates grinding together. Lucius, I whispered, holding up my trembling hands. It's me. Look at me. He snapped his jaws, the sound cracking through the silent air like a whip. He crouched, his muscles coiling. He was going to kill me. I didn't run. Running triggers the chase. Running makes you prey. Instead, I did the only thing I could. I surrendered. I sank to my knees in the snow. I tilted my head back, exposing the fragile column of my throat to the monster who wanted to tear it out. If this is how it ends, I thought, let it be by his hand. He lunged. The impact was like being hit by a landslide. He pinned me to the frozen earth, his massive paws pressing my shoulders into the ice. His jaws clamped around my throat. I felt the sharp points of his teeth against my skin, ready to puncture. But he didn't bite down. He held me there, his hot breath washing over my face, his growl rumbling against my collarbone. He was smelling me. Beneath the scent of the dungeon, beneath the scent of the traitor's blood on my clothes, he was searching for something. A memory. A tether. Lucius, I wept, tears freezing on my cheeks. I reached up, my hand shaking violently, and placed my palm against his snout. I didn't use force. I used the bond. I pushed past the static, past the madness, and I poured us into him. The way he looked at me at dinner, the heat of his skin against mine, the promise he made to never let me go. Come back to me. The giant wolf went rigid, a whine built in his throat, a high, keening sound of confusion. The golden fire in his eyes flickered, the void receding. He blinked, and for a second, I saw the man behind the beast. He pulled back, releasing my throat. He looked at me, really looked at me, and let out a howl that shattered the morning silence, a sound of pure, agonizing relief. He shifted. The sound of bones reshaping was sickening, a wet crunching, but a moment later, Lucius was there. He was naked, kneeling in the snow, pulling me into his arms with a desperation that threatened to crack my ribs. Lyra, he sobbed, burying his face in my neck, inhaling me like oxygen. I felt you die. The bond. It went silent. I blocked it, I gasped, clinging to his shoulders. To save you. To hide you. You foolish, wonderful woman. He pulled back, framing my face with his hands, his thumbs wiping away the dirt. Never do that again. Burn the world, Lyra, but do not shatter yourself to save me. We held each other in the snow, two broken halves finally fusing back together. But the universe doesn't grant pauses for lovers. A horn blasted in the distance, a sound of war. I looked up. On the ridge above us, silhouetted against the rising sun, an army stood. The Iron Fang, hundreds of them. And in the center, Dragan stood, holding a silver spear that glinted cruelly in the dawnlight. Chapter 15. The Final Stand. Lucius stood up, pulling me with him. He didn't look at the army. He looked at me, his eyes clear and terrifyingly calm. "Can you run?" he asked. "No," I answered honestly. My legs were spent. "Then we fight." He turned to the ridge. He didn't cower. He threw his head back and roared. It wasn't a call for help. It was a challenge to the gods of war. And the forest answered. From the tree line behind us they emerged. The fierce forest pack. They were battered, bandaged, and bleeding. But they were here. Soren was at the front, his side wrapped in gauze, holding a heavy axe. Dragan raised his spear, pointing it at us. "Kill them all!" he screamed, his voice cracking with madness. "But keep the girl alive." The two armies collided in the valley. The sound was deafening. The wet tear of flesh, the crunch of bone, the screams of men and wolves shifting and colliding. Lucius didn't just fight. He was a natural disaster. He waded into the Iron Fang ranks, a whirlwind of violence. He tore through them, eyes fixed on one target. Oh, I stayed at his back. I wasn't a warrior, but I was a survivor. When a wolf lunged at me, I didn't overpower him. I used the knife I stole from Belladonna to sever his hamstrings. I used small bursts of healer magic not to heal, but to blind, flashing light into the eyes of our attackers. Finally, the sea of bodies parted. The circle cleared. Lucius and Dragan faced each other in the center of the crimson snow. The monster and the salesman. "You should have stayed dead," Dragan spat, spinning the silver spear. "You should have kept the receipt," Lucius growled. They clashed. It was a blur of motion too fast for the human eye. Lucius was stronger, a juggernaut of power, but Dragan was faster, and he had the reach of the spear. Silver sliced Lucius's arm, hissing as it burned the skin. Lucius didn't flinch. He stepped inside the guard, landing a punch that shattered Dragan's nose with a sickening crunch. Dragan stumbled back, spitting blood and teeth. He grinned. A grotesque, red-stained expression. "I knew you were stronger, Lucius," Dragan wheezed. "That's why I didn't come alone." Dragan whistled. From the trees, 3 crossbow bolts sang through the air. They weren't aimed at Lucius. They were aimed at me. I didn't have time to scream. 2 bolts slammed into my thigh. 1 punched through my shoulder. The force threw me backward into the snow. "Lyra!" Lucius screamed, turning his head, his focus breaking for a fraction of a second. That was the mistake. The distraction Dragan needed. Dragan lunged. He drove the silver spear deep into Lucius's stomach, twisting the serrated blade. Lucius gasped, his eyes going wide with shock. He fell to his knees, the snow around him turning black with poisoned blood. "No!" I shrieked, the sound tearing my throat apart. Dragan pulled the spear out with a wet slide and kicked Lucius onto his back. He stood over him, raising the spear for the killing blow through the heart. "Look at her, Lucius," Dragan laughed, breathless and triumphant. "Look at her while I kill you, and know that she will be screaming my name tonight." Chapter 16. The True Luna. Time stopped. The sounds of battle faded into a dull roar. I saw Lucius's eyes meet mine. He was dying. The silver poison was spreading fast, turning his veins into black spiderwebs beneath his skin. He mouthed one word to me. "Run." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a bone. It wasn't my mind. It was the dam that had held back my power my entire life. I was a healer. I gave life. That was the rule. But nature demands balance. If I could give life, I could take it. I didn't run. I ignored the bolts in my body. I reached deep into the core of my soul, past the fear, past the trauma, and I grabbed the golden fire of the goddess. I didn't pull a trickle. I pulled the ocean. A shockwave of golden light exploded from my body. It vaporized the snow in a 10-foot radius. It knocked the combatants off their feet. The crossbow bolts in my flesh dissolved into dust. I stood up. My eyes were no longer brown. They were white, burning with the fury of a dying star. I walked toward Dragan. He turned, his eyes bulging as he saw the entity approaching him. What are you?" he stammered, backing away, the spear trembling in his hands. "I am the mistake you made, Dragan," I said. My voice wasn't mine. It was a chorus of every female he had ever underestimated. I raised my hand. I didn't touch him. I just pulled. I pulled the thread that tethered his soul to his body. Dragan screamed. It was a sound of absolute horror as his skin began to wither. His hair turned gray and brittle. His muscles atrophied. In seconds, I drained 50 years of life from him. I flicked my wrist, and he flew backward, hitting a tree with the sound of dry branches snapping. He slid down, a broken, ancient husk, gasping his last breath into the cold air. I dropped the power and fell to my knees beside Lucius. He was gray. His chest was barely moving. The black veins had reached his neck. I placed my hands on the gaping wound in his stomach. My light was fading, flickering like a dying candle. "Don't leave me," I commanded, my voice breaking. I poured everything I had left into him, not just magic, my own life force. I gave it to him until my vision went black, until I felt the cold creeping into my own heart. The black veins receded, the flesh knit together. The color flooded back into his cheeks. He gasped, sucking in a massive breath of air, his eyes snapping open. "Lyra," he whispered, reaching up to touch my face. I collapsed onto his chest, the magic gone, leaving me just a girl again. Just a girl who loved a monster. "I'm here," I whispered into his blood-soaked shirt as the darkness took me. I'm here. Chapter 17. Renewal. 6 months later. The snow had melted. The fierce forest was green and aggressive with life, smelling of wildflowers and wet pine. I sat on the porch of the pack house. It was halfway rebuilt. The charred stones were still visible, but we had planted ivy to cover them. "Scars," Lucius said, "were just proof that the wound had healed." The screen door creaked open. Lucius stepped out, holding 2 mugs of steaming coffee. He looked different. The darkness that used to live in the corners of his eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady peace. He still looked like a warrior, but he no longer looked like he was at war with himself. He sat beside me on the swing, the wood creaking under his weight. He wrapped a heavy arm around my shoulders, pulling me into the furnace of his body. I leaned into him, resting my head on his chest. I listened to the steady, strong beat of his heart, the heart I had restarted. "Dragan's pack surrendered the last of their weapons today," he said softly, staring out at the valley. "The council wants to merge the territories formally. They want you to lead the integration." "What did you tell them?" I asked, taking a sip of the coffee. It was sweet, just how I liked it. "I told them my Luna is busy," he chuckled, the sound vibrating against my cheek. His hand drifted down from my shoulder, resting gently, protectively, on the small, barely there bump of my stomach. I smiled, covering his large hand with mine. "We had visited Dragan's grave yesterday. It was just a patch of dirt in the woods, overgrown with weeds, no stone, no name. He was forgotten. But we were building a legacy that would last for generations. Do you regret it?" Lucius asked suddenly, his voice turning serious. "The pain? The rejection? The fear? If you could go back, would you change it?" I looked at him. I looked at the man who had walked into a storm to buy a broken girl. I looked at the home we were building from the ashes. I thought about the girl kneeling on the cold stone floor of the Iron Fang, wishing for death. And I thought about the woman sitting here, loved, powerful, and carrying the future. "No," I said softly. "Why?" I lifted his hand, kissing the scars on his knuckles. "Because," I whispered, meeting his golden eyes, "he rejected me and sealed his fate. You chose me and sealed my heart.